I've known a guy named Craig Wortman for about 15 years now, and he is a professor at Kellogg at Northwestern and teaches entrepreneurial sales. And one of the main ideas that he talks about, both in his class and in consulting engagements with clients, is the power of story. What he means by that is you can talk about features, you can talk about benefits, you can talk about all these other kinds of things, but the most impactful things that you can do in a sales opportunity are to talk about stories of clients and where they started and where they ended up as a result of using your product or service, stories about how engagements went internally, both good and bad. But the trick, in order to make them useful, is to have them collected and organized in some way so that the organization can benefit. And so he had this idea of what he called a story matrix, and it was or had different kind of categories and things like that. But the basic idea was to take all of the stories in the organization from the various people who've been out in market, the various people who've been involved with delivery, and to organize them in such a way that other members of the organization could consume them. He told me about this idea 15 years ago, and I've been enamored with it ever since. About 7 or 8 years ago, we had a large client of ours ask us to build what was effectively a knowledge management platform, but it was a similar idea. And the idea was how could we very quickly bring somebody new or even an existing team member up to speed quickly about what we as an organization think about a particular topic. So it could have been crypto, it could have been artificial intelligence, it could have been any number of things. It was all scoped in their case to emerging technology. But the basic idea was a consolidated set of what I called unified theory documents for a variety of topics that take all of the stuff that, in their case, team members had written about these various topics, synthesize all of it, and turn it into a kind of single page document that anybody could consume to very quickly get up to speed on what the organization thought about that topic at a particular point in time. And so the other key point there was that they were living documents that would change and grow over time. And once again, like that was an opportunity that not only that organization needed, but I thought many organizations would need. And then eventually realized that I need myself. And so for years, I've been enamored with this idea of a unified theory of any given topic and of creating a collection, an ever growing collection of unified theory documents. And it's something that I've tried to do as a piece of my knowledge management system, which is a subset of my personal operating system that I've talked about in other videos. But it's one of the most powerful. And it's powerful because we are drowning in information at all times, right? You are bombarded with stuff from Twitter and stuff from LinkedIn and various articles and email newsletters and all of those kinds of things. And very often I'll read that stuff and it'll be in one ear and out the other. And I might have thought it was useful, but I don't end up doing anything with it. And I decided eventually that I wanted to do something about this. And I wanted to make all of this knowledge and all this content that I was consuming more actionable and more useful, both for myself and for other people. And so I started this practice of creating unified theories about particular topics. And I want to explain to you briefly how you can kind of do the same thing. So, step one is to collect. So, as you're consuming all of this content, you take notes. You take notes or highlight passages in your Kindle, or you highlight passages in a physical book. You save these articles in some piece of software. And what I've increasingly done is I've put all of this stuff into a piece of software. Currently, I use a tool called Reflect. I used to use a tool called Roam. But what it allows me to do is I basically take any noun and I put little brackets around it. And what it does is it immediately spins up a new page for that topic. And so I could be reading something about email marketing. I could read an article about Mark Andreessen. I could read about Bitcoin or philosophy or whatever it is. And if I put little brackets around the nouns that kind of emerge in that article or in that passage from a book or whatever it is, it automatically spins up these new pages. And so what I found is that it becomes this dumping ground for all of this knowledge where I'm able to refer back to it later, but I'm able to do so in a much more organic way. If you've tried to use tools like Evernote or you've tried to use tools like Notion as your primary mechanism for capturing this knowledge, you probably have found that it's very difficult to do because they're too hierarchical. You end up spending a lot of time fiddling with the nested pages and where things live. Should it live here or should it live here? And what I really like about these tools like Roam, these tools like Reflect, is that they just are they work much more similar to how your brain works. I have various ideas and beliefs and things like that that are kind of just floating around in my head. I didn't deliberately organize them in any sort of way. Maybe my brain does, but I'm not sure what they are. I tend to think about my brain as a lot more of like neural connections, right? Like a connection between point A and point B constitutes an idea. I'd heard once that creativity is really just taking two disparate ideas and smashing them together in a new way. And these tools kind of work like that in the sense of I can go in and through the search, type in Mark Andreessen, and it will automatically pull up any article or book or note or whatever it is that I took about Mark Andreessen. And so if I decided I wanted to write a blog post, write an article or whatever it is about Mark Andreessen, I have all of these new pieces of information that I've accumulated over the years. And without consciously thinking about having to organize that, they just sort of emerge. And so it's really allowed me to be much more prolific with my writing. But the next step is, and what really helps me accelerate my knowledge retention and my memory is summarizing. And so I'll go through either a book and, after putting it down for a week or two, I will take all of my notes and I'll try to turn it into a single page, human readable document about that book. Or you can take all these disparate notes about Mark Andreessen and you can turn it into a single document that says, this is what Mark Andreessen thinks based on all the stuff that I've read. And obviously, there's a huge caveat here. Like, you haven't read everything about him or about any given topic because that's virtually unlimited and all of that. But given all of the things that I have read or I have been exposed to, this is the consolidation of what I think the key themes are. And that document is what I call my unified theory document. And that thing does live inside of Notion because that thing can be much more easily kind of categorized or nested or whatever it is, and is much more pleasant to consume as a reader. And so my workflow is basically I ingest stuff, into Readwise, or I read a tweet thread or whatever it is, and I take notes on it. I dump all that stuff into Reflect. I annotate those notes in Reflect by putting brackets around the nouns to let those pages kind of emerge. And then periodically, I will take a given topic and I will turn it into a unified theory document. I usually do this in response to a request from a friend or a request from an acquaintance. Because what I have found is that these unified theory documents are not just useful for me, they're extremely useful for other people. And so, an example, in the past year, I read a book called Die with Zero that was really interesting to me and a bunch of ideas that kind of broke my brain about how to think about money and all that kind of stuff. And it's come up enough times in conversation that I thought, I should turn this into the summarized document about what Bill Perkins thinks or what the Die with Zero kind of philosophy is. And so I turned that into a single page document. Another example is this idea of personal holding companies, which has come up over and over again this year as a lot of people are kind of thinking about the future of work and all of that kind of stuff. So I have a note in Notion on what a personal holding company is and how they're structured and all of that kind of stuff. And it's a similar unified theory document that I can now take and share with somebody else. And now they get the benefit of all of my reading and all of my synthesis as well. And so it's a super, super powerful tool, not just for myself, but it's a really powerful tool for my relationships. I think you can see how this would also be extremely valuable in the context of a company, right? So as you think about all of the knowledge that has accumulated, let's say you're in a professional services firm or a consulting practice. Think about all of the engagements your company has participated in or worked on. Think about all of the sales that you've won, the sales that you've lost. Think about all of the articles and the content that the people in your firm are reading in order to stay on top of their field and to stay up to date with best practices and things like that. All of that knowledge is currently siloed and living inside of individuals' heads. If you as an organization were to get in the habit of translating this stuff into unified theory documents that you then posted in a wiki or posted in a team Notion or whatever it was and made available for other people, uh, the combinatorial effect I think would be huge. People would be much more able to get up to speed quickly on particular clients, on particular topics. They'd be much better at their jobs because they would be benefiting from the pattern recognition that your consultants who've been in business for 30 years, now the associates that are kind of coming up can benefit from their knowledge without having to rely purely on osmosis and without having to force them to create, much more in-depth kind of training plans and things like that. It would all kind of happen organically as they're consuming and making sense of content themselves. And so I think that these unified theory documents are incredibly powerful tools as an individual, as an organization, as a tool to build relationships and things like that. And so I would encourage you to start dabbling in this. Start with one. Like go through maybe notes that you have if you have a note-taking system somewhere else. Pick one topic that you're super interested in or that you've been reading about and take a stab at turning it into this is what I believe to be true about this one particular topic. I use Notion for it because I think it's delightful to write in and it's very pretty and it allows me to very easily create public facing pages. But ultimately the tool doesn't matter. You can use Google Docs, you can use whatever you want. But the key is to, again, collect all of this information, try to summarize it and synthesize it so that in, 5 minutes or whatever it is in a single page, I can much more quickly understand what it is that I believe to be true about this topic at this particular time. So start with one, share it with somebody else, and consider kind of making this a piece of your own knowledge management system and personal management or personal operating system as well.